Hey, how's it going? This is your Daily Sweet Talk for July 17th, 2023. I feel like there are certain types of media, certain genres of media, not really genres, but form genres, um, that are underappreciated. And it fascinates me. Stuff like when I had looked into a lot was old like mobile games that are all really forgotten. There were games on Palm OS that are forgotten. Lots of tie-in games, but there's also tie-in comics. When it comes to comics, it's sort of a niche thing, but obviously there are a lot of people who are into all of the Marvel and DC comics. It's a huge industry, and even indie comics get enough of a following that they are adapted into these like really successful movies and TV shows, and even the comics are obviously really successful themselves. But you also have tie-in comics, which when I hear people talk about it, it's just like, oh yeah, that was a thing that happened. It's like you just see that it's a thing that happened, but you don't really hear people like, oh, dude, did you read the new um, issue of Bart Simpson or whatever? I used to read the Simpsons comics a lot when I was younger, and they're great. But it seems more like a sort of thing where you'll for fans of the Simpsons, I feel like Simpsons comics are more of a thing someone will make like a video essay about, like, did you know this happened in the Simpsons comics? Because obviously most Simpsons fans probably don't know, because it's or maybe they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember I read that when I was younger, I forgot about that. That would be my reaction, I guess. But I mean, I didn't read them religiously or anything, even still. So there would be a lot that I didn't know about in those comics either. But there's so many storylines, and that's just Simpsons comics. There's so many weird storylines in those. Some like they'll go way more out there than the show. The show's been was on for so long that the comics were going for so long during that as well. Um, and and that's just Simpsons, but there's also like for any cartoon you can think of almost. Rick and Morty comics, obviously. Um, uh, Regular show. I think Casey Green might have worked on those. Casey Green, one of my favorite artists, also wrote Invader Zim comics. The Ryan North wrote the Adventure Time comics, and I think that was taken over by Chris Hastings, and they both went on to work on really well received Marvel comics. I think Chris Hastings was already working on some Marvel stuff before that, but and even more obscure stuff than that probably. Just if you look way at way older comics, because that was I feel like there was a little bit of people were paying attention to them a little bit more during like the Adventure Time comics and stuff like that. But like think about old school like cartoons. I remember I found an old cartoons comic that had like Kids Next Door and Billy and Mandy comics in that. There's also all of the old comics in Disney Adventures magazine and Nick magazine, and those magazines had sort of a cult following, I guess, but for kids. When I read those magazines a lot when I was younger. But if you ask someone about like, oh, have you ever read Seen but Not Heard, or these are not tie-in comics, but they're in Nick magazine, Disney Adventures magazine, though. Or Kid Gravity, Monster Society, whatever. I think that's what it was called. Jetpack Pets. Um, People will not have heard of them, but there's this like such a huge genre, not a genre, but whatever. I don't know what else to call it. That is really overlooked. So I find it interesting. I find these always sort of things. I always find these sort of things interesting, but I would read as many of them as I could if I had any time to read, because it doesn't seem like anyone else is reading them really. It's cool.